all CEOs, me included, we don't actually know what we're doing.
They're all sharks, so all you got to do, though, is know shark behavior.
I don't think we've ever talked about this before.
We can capture all of the wallet share.
First place you start is with the product.
That's just the first note.
This is the Capital Stack. Hey, everybody. This is David Paul, the host of the Capital Stack podcast, where I talk to founders, operators, and investors about all things value creation and startups. I've got some new podcasting equipment, so it's hit or miss. I've made an investment, Luke. I made an investment in my podcast.
Let's get the ROI.
So now that I've spent money, I need to start making money. So I want you to pay for some advertising on my podcast.
I'm in. I love it.
I've got like 30 listeners. So, but they're diehard listeners.
I've been listening.
Yeah, you've been listening, so I think this could really increase your business. So I'll make sure to get with you on that and send you a one-pager. Luke Harmon has been the founder of a bootstrap company, a CEO. He has exited it. One of those real bootstrap companies. Bootstrapping has changed definition lately. I hear bootstrap company now means raised under 10 million. Whereas when Luke was a founder and a CEO, bootstrapping meant bootstrapping, no money.
Yeah, I didn't necessarily know that was there's a new definition of you could raise some money and call it bootstrapping, but that's a thing now.
Yeah, well, I talked to all these growth equity guys, and they're all like, "Oh, we like $50 million bootstrap companies," and I'm like, "Well, how many of those are there?" There really can't be that many of those.
It's amazing what you can do when you just start changing definitions.
Right, exactly. and they're like, "Well, no, I mean lightly capitalized." I'm like, "Well, what's light?" And they're like 10. I'm like, "Oh, okay, I get it."
Okay.
So basically you're not underwater with venture dollars is what you're saying.
I thought you were going to say maybe they had $500,000 in a safe for debt or something. Maybe that they would call themselves bootstrapped, or I don't know. But
so you had a startup, and now you're doing some other stuff on the go-to-market side. But let's start with your story.
Okay. We could say on the professional side, yeah. So that tech company was Profits for Purpose. I was the third partner there, and that was back in 2011. And then, so that was a B2B SaaS, true play. I can describe that company. We did employee giving and employee volunteering. So all of our clients were Fortune 1000, Estee Lauder, GoPro, Staples, Kaiser, and we would kind of empower their employee base. It was an employee engagement platform all around philanthropy. And so if a disaster struck, we'd build the interface where employees could log in and find a charity to either donate to or volunteer with. If they donated, it would come out of their paycheck, and then the company could see where they were donating and then match it. It could be, they could do all sorts of gamification with it, that sort of thing. So that was kind of the big first chapter in my career and then we sold it in 2018.
Wait, so how many years in total was that ride?
8 years. It was 8 years.
Okay. Yeah. And you never took money. So why didn't you ever do that?
That's a good question. I think there is multifaceted answer to that. I don't think we had the long-term vision of let's try to. Well, here I'll fast forward to the end where as a bootstrapped company, we were just paying people out of revenue we made, and then we'd use that revenue to go get more clients, which is an arithmetic sort of situation, right? It's you get some money in, you pay people, but I don't think me and my two partners didn't really fully grasp that hey, if we had grown to 10 or 15 million in revenue, when you exited, your valuation is completely different. Like we didn't really fully understand that. So that was one reason. Right out of college, I worked at a private equity firm.
So were you milking it a little bit?
What do you mean milking it?
Like, I mean, like, were you guys like cash flowing it and making like a lot of money out of it?
No, we weren't making a lot of money. We were paying ourselves. Right. We were making a living and living in San Diego. Right. But man, I'm telling you, like, it was always like, you got to build more product. And that was a creative story. Like, we had a development team in, like, overseas at one point. Then we hired in San Diego, and that got way too expensive. And then we ended up partnering with a firm that had a lot of developers in like Idaho. And that was kind of the sweet spot of like same time zone, same culture, but lower cost than San Diego for a development team. So yeah, but we were able to like pay ourselves and make a living, but we weren't like, like rolling in it, Like,
you weren't tricked. You didn't trick out your car.
No,
or anything like that.
Chicken outage going on. Yeah, but maybe that was part of the reason, right? It was like we weren't like starving and we weren't like rolling in it. So we were kind of like, hey, this business is working, like it, and let's keep. And we'd be like, should we go raise money? And we'd think about the effort there, and then we'd close another client for like 60 or 80 grand in ARR, and we'd be like, let's spend our energy making that client really happy and going and getting another 3 or 4 of those, then going and raising money. That was kind of the decision.
Were you the first company kind of in this employee engagement giving space?
So, that story is interesting because when we started, there was probably 3 or 4 others, and then they all raised money. And then like they all went through a round of like $1 million raised. And then a few years later, they all raised about 5 million. And then a few of them tanked, like went out of business. And I remember that like clearly because they were our competitors and it was like, they were doing great. Then all of a sudden they didn't exist anymore. And then, but 2 others in 2017 raised a large amount of money, like $40 million each. So there was a couple other companies when we started, but I would totally classify it as blue ocean back in 2011. Mm-hmm. Like 2010, 2011, it was like a total blue ocean scenario where like we didn't even know who the buyer was at Estee Lauder because they didn't have a department that dealt with it. Mm-hmm. Was it in marketing? Was it in HR? And that was probably from like 2010 to 2013, 2014. 2014, companies started having a corporate social responsibility department that would buy it. And then that's where it started to like, the market started to mature. Hopefully I'm making sense. I feel like
no, that was like really early. I was just thinking like, that's really early in like the SaaS days, like you were kind of a pioneer in HR tech in the SaaS days. So now that I'm thinking about timelining and where you actually fit.
Yeah. HR tech, there was some of the big, I think it was at a time where like there was enough familiarity with it that people understood it. Like there'd been Salesforce around and some different things,
Sure.
Like,
there was like the HCMs and stuff, but like all these different like engagement things, these kind of like nuanced, discretionary softwares to try to make employees' lives better was probably, that was more frontier back in the day.
It was definitely like early in that cycle. And I think too, that's one reason why like, at that stage, I feel like enterprise software, like the price point that we had was like, let's say it was $50,000, $60,000 a year. I feel like now it'd be pretty hard to close a $60,000 ARR.
Oh, dude. I mean, like, a $60,000 deal anywhere, that's good money.
Yeah. And there's just so many more, right? So many more options. Like people are building with no code. There's all these engagement tools and things like that. But yeah, in 2010 to 2014, 2015, it was like, I think it was a pretty unheard of. Yeah, you could have those enterprise deals basically.
So like you said that you would be in market, you were bootstrapped, but then you would have to build more product. And so that's really interesting to me because did the competition drag you into those production cycles?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I wouldn't say it was the competition because there wasn't enough of it for the client to be like, this is what your competitor's doing. It was more that we would kind of sell them on the feature set. And then as they started using it, they would be kind of disgruntled that it didn't do these other things.
Got it.
And that was driving. We were like, to fight churn, we were saying we need to, hey, let's keep evolving the platform.
Yeah. So there's a little overselling, which everyone does in software, about like what the capability was. And,
Totally.
you know, it really didn't come in the workflow as seamlessly as they thought it was.
Which, a side note about that, because the company that bought us, I thought their strategy was ingenious for that, because if you are in a blue ocean situation, you're by definition bringing software to the table that people aren't used to. So like 100% of the time, there's going to be an expectation gap, right? Because you're bringing software in and they didn't know what to expect. And so they're going to be disgruntled with this expectation gap. And the company that bought us, Your Cause, owned by BlackBod, their strategy was, we're just going to accept the fact that they're going to be kind of upset with all the feature set isn't there yet. We're going to over deliver on the service side. We're going to kill them with kindness with this. We're going to overstaff the service and build. I mean, they had like 45 account managers that had like personal relationships with each client. And man, that went a long way and kind of bought them a lot of grace, you know? Like, as people were like, hey, why doesn't the software do this or that? It bought them time, you know, to try to get the software more mature, which was a cool strategy.
And so you brought it through, and I remember, you know, and I tell the story a lot when you're in the room, so it's probably not going to like come off as magical as I think it was. But I remember when we first met, we were looking
This is a good story.
This is a great story.
Great story.
So the story is
By the way, it's such a good story, not to interrupt, because it is a microcosm. Like, it was such a clear representation of like what that company was.
Yeah. I mean, it was honest. And so, all right, so the story is, we find Profits for Purpose. It fit the box of my previous firm, Canal Partners, perfectly. My partner, Todd, and I, we went to the Profits for Purpose office, and we walked into it, and it's filled with these beautiful San Diegans that got up from their seats and started applauding us when we came in the room, which is like, dude, like, I don't like, you scratched an itch that I always have, which is attention. You know, like it was like you found my way to me and my partner Todd's heart, which is immediate, instant attention and gratification. So, I mean, I was about to write the check then, and we sat down, we heard the story, like, we're getting more and more into it. You know, the ACV looks good. You know, there's some churn, not a lot. You talked about the competitive advantage. And then we said, okay, what's the plan, guys? Like, what's the plan going forward? And then we got into this story, or you guys got into this story about going up market versus down market. And literally, like, right before we're talking for a couple hours, me and Todd were like outside on the phone with our other partners saying, like, we're doing this deal. Like, this deal's happening. We're going to come back with a term sheet signed. And we go in and we start talking about strategy and the plan. And then you guys just completely decompensate it. Like, I just remember you guys started like viciously, like attacking each other on strategy on what needs to be done for like an hour. Me and Todd are just looking at each other. It's like we weren't even in the room. And then they were like, well, what do you guys think? And we're like, we don't fucking know. Like, you know, like you guys got to figure this out and call us. And then, you know, I emailed you maybe a couple weeks later and like, yeah, we're going to sell. So,
yeah, I remember that was a microcosm because, you know, and one of the advantages, so with bootstrapping, like three partners, it was like we would, in the middle of the day, we would put our hats on of like, hey, I'm a salesperson or I'm an account rep or whatever. And then our rhythm was we would go mountain biking and then we would go grab beers and we would put our like owner hats on over beers and talk about different strategy and direction. But through that process over years, man, we became like brothers. And it was like probably what you saw was like the like brothers or cousins, like we none of us were afraid of each other. We were like, we're going to push to try to find the best answer. And that was just a common way of like us finding the path forward. It was just funny. We didn't really have a filter. We were like, we're just going to like have it out right here.
It was very authentic. It was a very authentic conversation. And that's when I knew I was
like, WTF is going on.
That's when I knew I was in love with you. And we've carried the relationship further.
Man.
So you sold to BlackBod, which, is a big legacy dinosaur competitor in the education space.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if you can agree with me on that, or if that's going to violate some kind of non-disparagement, but
no, and that's their strategy, right? They will buy, so technically we sold to Your Cause, which then literally like a couple months later sold to BlackBod.
Gotcha.
And BlackBod's strategy, it will be like, let's say they're in 12 verticals, like university fundraising, nonprofit management, whatever. Like, it's crazy. They'll all be the BlackBod brand. And for like, some people will hate this brand and like this brand. It's because they've grown through acquisition, and it's an old company, and they don't really run any of them. They're all operate as their own individual things. So that's kind of, so we got just folded into that monster, basically, is kind of what happened.
So you did your time, you got paid. Now what are you up to, Luke?
Now I'm doing Serendipity. It's a marketing agency. Let me think if there's anything else I want to say about that.
Because I mean, like, so looking back on it, I mean, did you think you made the right decisions? Obviously there's no regrets, but like, how would you have done things differently?
Yeah, I mean, I think like I wouldn't replace the time or experience for anything. Like, it was a great ride, and like I said, getting to do life with people you love, and that, I think from a business standpoint, one of the lessons was like, man, when it's blue ocean, it's only blue ocean for a certain amount of time.
Mm-hmm.
It's gonna get filled up, and if we had been like, hey, let's maximize the finances on this. It would have been, because like the two competitors, this is public knowledge. Your Cause sold for like 200+ million, and then the other company didn't sell, but they were like a year later they were valued at $1 billion. So
Mm-hmm.
it was like they were like, let's take advantage of this moment in time, grow as fast as we can, and I think financially they're much bigger.
So wait, let's put a pin in that, because that's like really, really interesting. So this blue ocean, the timing is now, right? Like, you were there. You were there. So many founders think they're there. What is signal meaning you're there versus you're not there? Because I think that's super important when there's like market pull and there's like a specific time, versus when a founder thinks they need to raise money because of some anecdotal data.
So I think that there's two dangers in that scenario. One is this is purely from just a financial ceiling standpoint. There's two dangers. One is what we did, where staying, like, not realizing we were there soon enough, and the other is people think they're there and they're not. So if you think you're there and you're not, my thought would be is you are probably lying to yourself. Like, you are excited about the opportunity, but you're not being honest with yourself about what the market says. And in my opinion, it's just really clear when you're there. And what really clear means is people can't sign contracts and pay you fast enough. I wouldn't even say, like, P4P's experience, it was a hard sales cycle. I've talked to other founders that they're like, man, when they hit it, it was just like they just couldn't, like, people were signing immediately. I don't think it has to be immediately, but I think in the P4P experience, it was like we were signing contracts in like a less than 6 month sales cycle that were close to 6 figures annually. And like, we could just feel the market was growing, right? Like, big companies were creating departments for this.
Were you getting like inbound?
A lot of our stuff was outbound. It was like, because people didn't even know that that's what they wanted, right? Like, they weren't searching for it. They weren't like, that was part of it. Blue ocean is like, there was no people,
right?
The market didn't exist. So we kind of went out and got it. But I think it's like, if you if you can't grow fast enough, like, or like if you're closing business and you're like, man, we're getting slowed down because of like now all our resources are going toward implementation. How nice would it be to keep all your growth stuff going and then be able to staff so you can satisfy that? We used to always say, it felt like you were driving with 2 feet. Like you'd be like gas, then brake, then gas, then brake. You'd do a sales cycle and close business and be like, and you just stop.
Right.
So that was like, I think if we were just like, how do we maximize the finances? That would have been time to go raise $1 million or $2 million and make sure that we never slowed down the sales cycle. And then I think on the other side, I think we just didn't like feel like going out and bringing on board members and making things more complicated than they needed to be. But I think we kind of missed some of the financial ceiling with that. Was
there fear in that if you look back on it?
Was there fear? I can only speak for myself. I think it was less fear and more just like uneducatedness.
Got it.
Yeah.
Because obviously people were calling you, right? Like we weren't the only person that came to your door.
Well, I think it was like the conversation was always like, hey, we just signed a $60,000 deal. Should we spend energy going and getting investors or getting 3 more $60,000 deals? And it was always just like, this makes sense. Let's go. Like, it was just like, it was simplistic. It was like, why would we get investors when we could go help 4 more clients, you know?
Right.
So it felt just like logic at the time.
It's so counterintuitive to what people do today.
Yeah. But I was shocked through the exit process, not shocked, maybe shocked. What I learned through the exit process was, so Providence Equity owned Your Cause, and they bought us for a low multiple. And like 4 months later, they sold us for like way higher multiple, you know? And so I just didn't know that I didn't really understand like I don't think we understood how the math worked, you know, of like, we were just like, hey, let's satisfy these clients and help people. And as opposed to being like, oh wait, you could think on a few different dimensions than that. Yeah, if that makes sense. I don't want to make myself sound like a simpleton, but
if you were operating, and I mean, like it's not. I mean, product market fit and building software is hard, right? And then fulfilling and keeping customers is hard, especially in a space that is getting funded, you know. And I mean, I'm sure your $75,000 deals turned to $20,000 deals because the cost of acquisition and the cost of development and the features was subsidized by investor dollars.
Yeah, so that's exactly what happened. Was that when they raised when our competitors raised $40 million. The deals that were going for 70,000 went to 20,000. And then we were like, wait a minute, this is all our math just changed. What are we going to do? So that's what
ACV compression's real.
Yeah. And I think that ties directly to that window of the blue ocean, right?
Right.
It's like, if you're in the blue ocean, the reason to raise money is because you have a window where you're either going to emerge as a market leader, or you're going to either be pushed out, fail, or, you know, have to be brought into, like, folded into the market leader. But it's going to happen. If you are in a blue ocean, it's not going to stay that way, you know?
Right.
You have
if there's money to be made, you are going to get compressed out.
Yeah. Yep. Yeah, exactly. And it was interesting watching and to be honest, the other 2 founders at those 2 companies that raised 40 million, they were both, like, one of the guys is probably in his mid 60s now, and the other guy is maybe 50. So they definitely like had a few iterations in their career too, heading into this. So I think they'd seen the cycle a couple times, if that makes sense. So,
and so tell us about Serendipity.
Yeah. So Serendipity, we are a HubSpot B2B marketing agency. After P4P, I stayed on with BlackBod for a year and didn't know exactly what to do. I started grabbing coffees and beers with other founders. And a couple of them said, hey, can I hire you to help on the sales and marketing side? And that's, I think that was because that's where our conversations went, because that's what I was drawn to. But also I became really passionate about it through the sale, because I realized that the number one driver of valuation for a software company is it's growth, it's sales. Like the first thing that Yorkhouse did when they bought P4P was they got rid of all our software. And so if I sit down with the founder and he's obsessed with the software and building features, my first thing is to try to educate him that, like, man, from a value creation standpoint, you're kind of living in your own world. You need to go, you need to get validated by revenue as fast as you can. And so that kind of became my soapbox. And then I had a few consulting clients, and then kind of decided I don't want this to be the Luke Harmon show. I would like to build an agency around it. And so that's Serendipity. And then we became a HubSpot agency because I did have a few clients raise Series A. One raised 14 million, one raised 10 million, one raised 8 million. And all of a sudden the work we were doing, it became too much. Like we used to work with the founder. Now we hired a director of sales. Now there's a director of marketing. But if we used HubSpot, we could kind of keep everyone in the loop. We could, like, leadership could see their dashboards, their KPIs. Marketing could drive leads directly to salespeople. So we became a HubSpot agency like a year and a half ago. And now it's like every client we work with uses. We do all the marketing and sales enablement through HubSpot now. So 60% of the client base is SaaS. So that's the majority of it. And a smattering of like other industries and stuff.
You know, it's so funny when you talk about technology, because generally speaking, a lot of these companies, they come into existence because the legacy incumbents that eventually will buy them, like, they say that they're winning because of their technology, right? Whether it's additional features or scalability or whatever. And the problem is, though, is that, like, that may be true. You really can't test it, though, because it hasn't been run under scale. It's like one of those, it's like one of those things. It's like, okay, you say that you've got a more scalable solution, but it's never been tested with actual, like, data going through it or usage, et cetera, et cetera. And so it's never really been given a chance, even when it is acquired, because the bigger company is not going to risk putting all their dollars through your platform.
There's no way. And I mean, the way software changes, like, within 3 years, whatever was best in class is going to be 3 years old, which is dog years. It's like decades old, you know? And
Right.
So if you're throwing all your money into software, you're lying to yourself that it's going to be around in a few years. You know, it's probably going to be rebuilt. And you're also, like I said, you're living in your head about a lot of the time, about what features the market needs, as opposed to, I mean, because one thing we did at P4P was like the combo of like recurring revenue, and then like clients could pay for features to be built. And then it was like, now it's not an idea. It's like, you got to put your money where your mouth is and say, like, we're willing to pay for this feature. And now you're super willing to invest in the tech. But from like my current role at Serendipity, I feel like I'm just constantly preaching that, like, man, if you're building this thing, the number one thing is not, like, you need to be investing in sales and marketing, like revenue. That's what is going to.
So how do you balance that, though? Because the founders and the salespeople are hearing from their customers that, oh, we just need this one more thing, right? And oftentimes that could be a lie, right? I mean, I've seen it been a lie several times, and we've wasted hundreds of thousands and millions of dollars on customers lying to us, right? So how do you, and like, do you think in today's age, I mean, 2011 is a long time ago, can you get people to pay for upgrades and features today? Or do you think that the SaaS buyer is just not really into that?
I mean, I think there's like many answers to that. But I like to like rattle off a few. One of my partners had this great line. He leaned on like the third time's a charm. Like every time a client would ask for something, we'd say, hey, if you and 2 other clients are asking for this, we will build it for free. It's the 3rd time's a charm. But if you're just kind of coming up with it, like we'll write it down. Otherwise, we'll scope it out and here's like our dev rate to build it. So I think there was like some negotiation, and some of it was like playing to the heart of like a catchy line, like 3rd time's a charm. And sometimes it was like playing to the head of like, hey, here's an answer for you of how to get it built. But yeah, definitely attention. Because the other side of that coin, if a client's asking for it, is like, if you don't have the revenue to build it or the investment to build it, you're not going to be around anymore, you know?
Mm-hmm.
I feel like it's a problem that you have to it's a tension you have to live with and problem solve, as opposed to like just solve it. Because you can't just give the client every piece of software they want, you know?
Well, no. But like you're talking about clients that are already signed and upgrades, right? And expansion. And that's one thing, but I'm talking about getting them to initially buy it.
In the initial sales process?
In the initial sales process, right? So let's say you are in blue ocean, right?
Yeah.
0 to 1 product, 0 to 1 in revenue, in million. And it's, I think this is interesting. If it just did this, but just did this can cost a founder tons and tons of money.
Yeah.
So how do you get there? I mean, I guess it's like how big of a pain point is it really? I mean, if they're not willing to get in the wedge.
I think the devil's in the details there, because it's like, if they're like, we need that feature in the SOW, you know, then let's get on the same page about that feature and exactly what it does, and, you know, and when it'll be delivered. We would do a thing sometimes where we'd say like, look, let me explain scope to you. It's feature set, it's time, and it's money. Those are the 3 variables. And if you mess with any of those, it's going to affect the other 2. And maybe we'll give you a $20,000 credit, you know? So within reason, you can ask for additional features, but at some point, like, you need to start saying no to some features or having internal conversations. And so I think there was like, I think it's like case by case negotiation, like how you handle those.
Yeah. And you know, it's funny. It's like, because I think it really comes down to how valuable is the wedge, right?
Yeah.
And, you know, like, what is the initial wedge product that gets in there to like provide utility? And then it's, okay, well, if you don't like it, you don't like it, right? But to your point, I really like the SOW piece. Like, you know, you're an early adopter. I know I'm an early adopter. That, you know, we're an early stage company, so let's just put this in the SOW. But I don't feel like I don't feel like founders do that. They're like, oh, well, they're just so scared. You know, they'll just go back and they'll say, okay, we just need to build it, and then they'll buy it, as opposed to getting them to really put their money where their mouth is.
I think too, there's a balance. Like, it's an art to be honest in a way that is effective.
Right.
Because you can be like, hey, we're super new. We have nothing proven. Okay. Yeah. That's honest, but it's not effective. But you can say, hey, we're super new. The benefit for you in that is you're a major customer for us. You're going to get all my time and attention. And I really, really care what you think. And you're going to co-create this product. Are you willing to go on this journey with us? Maybe can we fly out there? Can we meet? You know, now you're being honest, but
but they're buying you too, right? Like, they see the glimmer in your eye, and they know that you can help them with their problem. Let's talk about like qualification, because I think that's super huge, right? In these sales processes. And like, you know, there's nothing worse than doing a huge sales cycle, realizing the person's got no power to make the decision like this and to buy it, because I think founders really kind of run into that a great deal, is that let's go demo the software. And they're just looking for affirmations on demos, and they're not really getting to the no.
Yeah. I mean, you gotta, dude, I got so much to say about what you just said, but
give it to me, baby.
Well, the very first thing is it has to be the founder. In the sales process, right? Mm-hmm. And if it's the founder needs to like have some sales training. Like, I remember when I was like, I've watched so many YouTube videos on how to sell cars. Like, I've never worked as a car salesman, but like, I feel like the most basic sales training stuff is the stuff that like you need to learn. But then I think like as a founder, you cannot hire a salesperson and expect them to close sales when you're under $1 million in revenue. And the reason is because the product market is always changing. And so you need to be super close to what is effective and iterate. And also what you said, like they're not buying your software because it doesn't exist. They're buying the relationship with you, And so I think as far as, and then part of that, if you're the founder and you're all in on that, it's having the guts to understand that to be an effective salesperson, you need to ask the question of like, do you have the budget? Do you have the decision-making power? Do you have,
How do I know? Like, how do I know that you have the decision power?
And it's like, there's career salespeople that are really good salespeople. They will always ask, but as a founder, it's the burden's on you to be like, I am a salesperson now. Like, let me ask the hard questions, So I think the founder's got to own that and like actually develop the technical skills of being a salesperson.
How does Serendipity help with that?
We do a lot of I do coaching around it to clients, but that part of closing the deal, like I almost feel like I act as like sometimes I feel like I'm being somewhat of a hole because I'm telling the founder like, no, it has to be you. Like revenue is most important and it has to be you.
Right.
We can bring you a lead. We can make sure they're quality. We can tell you they have been on the site. They've done these different things, interacted with your brand. But to close the deal, that's got to be you. So I think that last stage, that's going to be the founder. For us on the marketing side, I think.
But don't you think that there's an opportunity there? I mean, it does have to be them, 1,000%. I completely agree with you, but they still don't have the skills, right? So like, what is the thing? I mean, that's why I was like, I always loved Jellyfish, that consultant agency that just specializes in that 0 to 1 sales and they kind of like come on as like a sale or like a chief of staff or something, right? And like they come in and like, like pretend they're like taking notes for the CEO, but they really are just a coach and and then after the call, like being like, dude, you missed this window, dude. Like, so like, I mean, I think there's a huge opportunity there.
Yeah. So one of the things we do is we help build out the deal stages, right? So like, hey, when would you consider it a deal? When would it move to the next? We'll jump on calls and give feedback of like
pipeline qualification. Like, what is this? Yeah.
Help build it and then fill it and then help. And then I always say like you can't fix a golf swing until you have a golf swing, because I feel like it's like you create the deal stages and then you need to have people flow through it and you need to iterate on it and examine how is that working, how is that going, is that accurate? So we'll help build the deal stages, we'll coach to it, and then we'll help fill it. And I think another thing you said a few minutes ago I thought was really interesting. I feel like one thing that would happen to us a lot at P4P was like we would pitch a deal and then we would not win it. And then a year later, we'd meet them again and they're like, oh, we went with your competitor. We totally forgot about you guys. And so part of it is like understanding that being in the right place at the right time with those prospects is really, really important, and like feeding them content. So it's after a demo, if they're not going to close within, let's say, 45 days, what do you do with them then? How do you nurture them? How do you keep them engaged so that when their conversation says like, hey, we need to revisit that product, how do they not, go with the competitor or try to build it in-house or things like that? Is that making sense?
Makes a ton of sense, Luke. Everything you say makes sense.
You make me feel great. Thank you.
So what are you excited about this year? Besides that, I moved here.
I am pumped you moved here. Been grabbing, hanging out as families. That's pretty fun. Man, I keeping it on the professional front. The HubSpot focus for Serendipity has been incredible. Like doing all things HubSpot. We just tiered up to tier gold yesterday. That's like a deal in the HubSpot world. It just means that we've done a certain tier and caliber of work, reviews and different stuff. in HubSpot. But I think that focus has been really cool for our, like, I was talking to the client about it. He was saying like like the leader's role, man, it's just like getting everyone saying like, this is what the tool we're using. This is how we're doing it. And I feel like that focus for us with our clients has like provided a lot of alignment from sales teams to marketing teams to leadership teams.
Well, they did such an exceptional job building content around their product about like, this is what automation is, and this is what CRM is, and this is like the best in class way to do things. These are what objects are.
Yeah. So, and how that works for Serendipity with clients is like, as we get things going, there's so much material for the client to jump onto and either do themselves or say like, hey, can we have Serendipity help with this? But they can always teach themselves, how to use it. But yeah, it's all driven toward setting up the sales teams, whether it's the founders in the early days or the sales team as they build it with more leads to close. But HubSpot lets us like measure it and stuff.
So looking into 2024, where do you think the puck is going on go-to-market? I mean, I think the buyer of SaaS is fatigued. I'm not sure LinkedIn cold outreach works anymore. Like cold email, I don't know, works anymore. How do you think about acquisition strategies?
Yeah, so I think that it is, I didn't coin this term. What's the guy's name? Sangram? I'm going to butcher his name. But he's got this whole philosophy and I love it. And he's like, hey, the traditional funnel is like this, where you bring people in. The problem with that is that when someone closes, the relationship ends. With B2B SaaS, it's a flipped funnel. And so, yeah, you start with your ICP and then you make your product and company famous with inside of your ICP. So it's not just a cold call or a cold DM or a cold email. It's with what you can do nowadays. The technology is incredible. If there's 50,000 people in the country or 100,000 that could influence the buying decision, you can make, on a low ad spend, you can target those people and make them see your brand everywhere. Mm-hmm. So it is content creation, having a brand personality, but it's just being incredibly targeted with how you put that out there. I was talking with the founder this morning. It was giving me examples where the CTO at Costco had called him. And this guy was the guy with the budget. And he was like, hey, I've never heard of you, but 15 people on my team mentioned your name. And this is a small company. Nobody knows who this is, but they were incredibly targeted to anybody in the like they would have influence on decision-making power. They were putting their content in front of them. And the CTO of Costco freaking called him. It was like, man, everyone on my team talks about you guys. So I think that's it. It's the flipped funnel. That's got to be the strategy, I feel like, because cold calling, nobody picks up. LinkedIn messaging, everyone's annoyed. Emailing, Google won't let you do it anymore. Like as far as cold email.
What about partnerships?
I mean, I think partnerships are incredible. They take a lot of effort to set up, but if you do, Dan Martell says it this way. You can either build a railroad all the way across the country, or you can just, if it's already built, you can grab, and there's a train coming, you can grab onto it. So you're going to go way faster. You don't have to build all the rail, but you're going to have to weigh what you give up in the process, and
that matters. And I think there's just a matter of capacity, right? Like I'm not quite sold on when I'm not quite sold on when partnerships make sense for a company, like as a go-to-market strategy, specifically like an early stage.
Specifically, early stage is interesting because you might not have enough data to say what you actually have,
Right.
But I mean, there's absolutely no doubt about it. If you get the right partnership, it opens up everything.
Totally.
There's no doubt about it. But how much energy does it take to get that? How much will it cost that partner to integrate you? Like maybe it doesn't make sense from their angle. And then how much do you give up in the process? I think those are all like factors to weigh. But No doubt about it. Like if you get the right one, it can change your business and life, you know?
Awesome. Luke, this is great, man. Thanks for so much for coming on.
Dude, I know we could talk about a lot of stuff for a lot of time, but thanks for having me.
Let's do a part 2.
I'm in.
I want to do like a 3-hour Lex Friedman podcast with you. Just talking about everything.
Yeah, I'm in. I don't know if people would stick around to listen to me talk for.
I want to call you like 5 times a day, but I have to like restrain myself. I'm like, he's gonna get freaked out if I call him this much.
Dude, hit me up.
All right, you're open to this?
Absolutely.
Okay, I'm gonna start calling you like I'm like a 4 call a day kind of guy. I'm very high maintenance. I'm a very high maintenance friend.
I'm in charge of if I pick up or not.
Yeah. Did I show up?
I love getting your calls. It's
Awesome. Everybody, thank you so much. Luke, wait a minute. Before I sign off, how can people get in touch with you?
Our website is myserendipitysales.com. I'm on LinkedIn, Luke Harmon, Serendipity. Those would be the places.
Awesome. Let's try this again. Thank you so much for coming in and listening to The Capital Stack. We drop an episode every Tuesday. If you like it, please subscribe, tell a friend. We're on all major platforms. You can go to davidpaul.com. Took that domain name off the market. It was a couple $1 million. If anyone wants to buy it. And we'll see you next week on Tuesday. Thank you so much. Bye-bye.
Thank you for tuning in to the Capital Stack Podcast. Make sure to share this with someone you know that can benefit from this content. Remember to support this show by rating, reviewing, and subscribing. David Paul is the founder and general partner at DWP Capital. All opinions expressed by David and podcast guests are solely their own opinions and do not reflect the opinion of DWP Capital. This podcast is for informational purposes only and should not be relied upon for decisions. David and guests may maintain positions in the securities discussed on this podcast.